Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. And on this episode, I am once again joined by Tom, and we're going to talk about some, paranormal cryptids. Hey Tom.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm enjoying my evening and the very bizarre conversations I think that we're going to have shortly.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I wondered what we could do. I was thinking to myself, what can I talk to Tom about, and what are the listeners going to enjoy? I didn't want to do like a random ghost story because I've done a few of those. UFOs and aliens, I'm always a fan of that stuff, but I thought I wanted to do something a bit more off the wall. So I thought that we sort of go and revisit sort of paranormal cryptids and those kind of harbingers of doom that sort of pop up from now and again. Sort of a little bit beyond the Mothman. You know, I didn't want to just do the Mothman. I didn't want to talk about the Mothman because everybody talks about the Mothman. So I think that's been covered, literally been covered to death. So I thought, well, what else is there? Let's really think about what else is out there. And there's lots out there. There's lots of stuff we can talk about. So I thought, well, let's talk about the first thing that I came to, and I thought, yeah, let's do that. And that was this kind of phantom that's allegedly has been stalking Chernobyl before the Chernobyl disaster.
Yeah, and this is one that I'm not too familiar with, so you're going to have to educate me here.
Well, it is on the same sort of parallels as the Mothman, the whole Point Pleasant thing, because obviously with the Mothman, as if anybody hasn't, how can I don't want to go into it too much. The bridge collapsed in the town and people lost their lives, and the Mothman was kind of a harbinger of a warning to say that this is going to happen.
You'd see him before.
Yeah,
there was something terrible happened apparently.
And there were multiple people that apparently witnessed this, this creature, and some even had contact, to where it was kind of relaying, not relaying a message, but relaying a warning to them. And this is kind of similar to what happened with Chernobyl. And of course, if you remember back in one of the worst, or if not the worst, nuclear disaster to happen. I remember it. I remember it being on the telly, and they said that there has been a nuclear plant in Russia that, kind of melted down, and they were trying to contain it. And after that, it was some time after it, I remember these warnings to say that at certain times you have to stay in because there was a radioactive cloud coming over the country. Because where there was it would put this plume up of radioactive dust and stuff, and it was going around the planet. And
really?
Yeah, it was kind of scary,
I remember something. Well, people were saying something like that might happen after that. The Fukushima in Japan, was it Fukushima nuclear disaster? Something like that. There was a big explosion, and one of the reactors went down, and they were saying like there was going to be clouds of radioactive dust coming over. I don't think it ever reached that. It was probably too far away to reach us, but I remember the news worrying about that. Because I was a bit too young I was only 3 when when Chernobyl happened, so I don't remember any of that.
I think when Chernobyl happened, I think I'd left school for was it 4 or 5? I think I was about 17 or 18. I was a teenager, and sort of I was a little bit worried about it, but of course going out and partying was hanging around with my mates was more important than some nuclear power plant melting down. But I'm going to read the first paragraph so that we get a little bit of background. So it's like 1986, the world's it was the worst nuclear disaster in the world that has ever seen, and it's obviously Chernobyl. And it was been abandoned for nearly a quarter of a century, and witnesses believe the spirits of those who died in the tragic accident are still roaming the town. Now, so uh, you can go to Chernobyl now, and you can take a holiday. You can go and you can have a tour of the city where the work, because there was a city built in Chernobyl. There was a city built for the people that worked at the power plant, and there was tens of thousands of people that lived in this city. It was it was a full blown thing. Everyone lived. There was schools. There was children. There was there was infrastructure. It was all there, and that was I got to pronounce it correctly because people will tell me. I think it was Pripyat, and they basically that city when this new disaster happened, within a few days it was completely evacuated. Okay, everyone was basically down tools and leave. They shipped in all these buses, these coaches, and they just shipped people out. Just you leave. And it was left, and it's now a ghost town. And of course, nature has taken it over. You can go on YouTube and you can put in Pripyat tour and stuff, and people have videoed their tours because the radiation levels now are low enough that you can go there for a short period of time. Well, and you can have a tour. But there are people that still that have gone back there, and people that live on farms and stuff, and farm and stuff, and they're still around. But there were people, I think a number of people died, and obviously soldiers were drafted in to remove the nuclear material after the explosion, and sadly there were those people lost their lives. They became sick and died. But other people have said that when they've gone on these tours that they've seen things and experienced stuff. So what do you think might be going on there a minute? What's your thoughts on that?
About the people seeing things? I don't know, because I've heard stories like that in after disasters. And I always wonder if it's like a nuclear disaster. Could it just be like the radiation affecting people's minds, so they see strange things when they go there? Or maybe it's just like the knowledge that something terrible's happened there, and the sort of eerie ghost town feeling of a place like that. But I don't know. How many people actually died? Do you know? Is it like thousands of people, or was it just like the few people that cleared out the...
There were... Okay, so I'm not fully up on the exact numbers. Maybe I should have been, but...
Sorry, I've just sprung that question on you there.
No, it's fine, because I've got a rough idea. Now, on the initial... When the reactor overheated and exploded, okay, what they were doing, as far as I understand, they were doing an exercise, and something went wrong, and one of the reactors went into like overload and exploded, and then they had this huge meltdown. All of this nuclear material, because these rods overheated, all this nuclear material melted and went into the just sort of melted through the foundations and the building. Now, in the initial explosion, I think a handful of people died. Okay. Through the explosion, the concussion of the explosion, but also through exposure, because some people were immediately exposed to massively high levels of radiation, and of course, it only takes a split second to be exposed to those kind of levels of radiation, and you're done for. Your body is you're done for. But also afterwards, what they were doing, they were trying to contain all of the radioactive material. So what they were doing is they were bringing in troops, and these, whether they were conscripts or full time troops, they were people, and all they had to protect themselves were like lead-lined aprons and gloves and that kind of very rudimentary stuff, which, let's be honest, at those levels of radiation, there isn't much out there that's going to protect you. Okay? So these people obviously, over time, became very sick, if not very quickly, and got cancers and sadly died. So, yeah. But, I mean, they were, these guys that did it, that went in there and shoveled that stuff back into the hole, are heroes, because they literally sacrificed themselves. But maybe at the time, they didn't fully understand what was, going on. They were just thinking, there's been an explosion, let's just clear it up.
Yeah. I'm just looking it up now, actually. It's saying, well, they're saying the official estimate of how many people died in the immediate blast was only 30, but there
30
could be
people,
only 30 people, but the long-term deaths from all the people that went
Yeah.
in to clear up, the liquidators, as they were called, could be like 4,000, something like that.
It's a lot of people. That's a lot. I mean, if you think about it, you're not you get exposed to something like that, and it's not you don't you're not going to get sick straight away, but over the years, it's you suddenly get ailments, you get aches or pains, and do you know what I mean? It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I was asking because if if it was like thousands of people died on the spot, that could explain the paranormal phenomena. But I also suppose just the sort of trauma of this whole city suddenly having to, the terror of them all having to suddenly uproot and clear out, and the fear of the whole lives being upturned, that must have left some sort of imprint on the area. Even if they didn't die, it must have been like, you can say if there's a great outpouring of emotion, all at once, that can sort of leave an imprint on a place, and that could also have something to do with the strange happenings at Chernobyl.
Well, that's true. I mean, you imagine that you're at home having your dinner, and then somebody, a military man, knocks on your door and says, "You've got 4 hours to pack a suitcase and be at your front door. This city there's been a disaster. You're being evacuated. Are we coming back? I don't know. You can maybe come back in a week or a month or 6 months." And no one came back, and that whole place was left to the elements. Everything.
Yeah,
it's bizarre, but
it must be so eerie as just going into like a ghost town and just seeing like, because I guess people didn't have much time to clear away anything. They just get out and it would just look like people's homes were just sat there.
It was like they just vanished.
Still lived in.
Like they just vanished. Like pack a suitcase and you go, and you never came back. You never come back. All of your stuff. Obviously, over the years, it's now quite. Should we say it's looked after? There's the security and stuff, but I think the first few years of it being abandoned, there must have been. Let's be honest, there must have been people that are going in and looting and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
and seeing an opportunity to steal people's belongings. So and obviously you're going to get wild dogs, and of course nature starts to take over. So you're going to get structures will become unsound, and there will be collapses. So it's a bit of a risk. But what I was going to say was, 1986 is this when the Chernobyl meltdown disaster happened, and before that, in April of 86, the people living and working at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, right, located near Pripyat, Ukraine, in the former Soviet Union, began to experience a series of strange events. Sightings of a creature described as a large black bird or a headless man with a 20-foot wingspan, red eyes, began to be reported by workers of the power plant. The creature would later become known as the Blackbird of Chernobyl. So before this disaster happened, and we're seeing parallels here with Mothman, there are many parallels. So workers of the power plant were seeing this creature, this thing with glowing red eyes, apparently with this huge wingspan. I mean, that's massive. I mean, what do you think? What do you think's going on there?
I don't know. It sounds very much like the Mothman to me, especially the fact that it was seen just before so it was seen at the start of April. I'm reading through this article. It doesn't get an exact date, and it was like the 26th of April is when the nuclear reactor went down. So.
Yeah. Well, it says here, people who witnessed the Blackbird soon started to experience horrific nightmares, threatening phone calls, and some had first-hand encounters with the winged beast. Okay, and then it says reports of these strange happenings continued to increase until the morning of April the 26th, 1986 at 1:23 a.m. when reactor number 1, 4, at the Chernobyl nuclear plant in the former Soviet Union exploded. So
threatening phone calls.
yeah, threatening. I mean, okay, so you work at a power plant and you see this thing, and then you start to receive maybe a threatening phone call. I mean, I don't know what the connection would be with that, and you know,
that's I'm not very familiar with the Mothman story, but isn't there something like that in there that people start to receive strange phone calls?
So with without getting all my notes out and get my Mothman book and stuff from memory, and my memory's not as good as it used to be, but from memory, I do remember that some individuals were getting phone calls from an individual who would tell them things about events that they maybe didn't at the time made no sense, but later did, and that there was some sort of premonitions or things that didn't really make sense. But they were talking to someone, and also another thing is that the individual that they were talking to sounded almost, I'm not going to say mechanical, but in a sense slightly robotic. So there was that kind of conversation thing going on there with phone calls, and of course you had the teenagers with the Mothman, Point Pleasant and Mothman. There was that teenagers in their car. They were just chilling, parked at the side of the road, and they say that they were chased by a large black winged beast with glowing red eyes, and it was it flew over their car, and it went up onto the old disused factory, and it sat up on the wall, and it just watched them, and they said it was at least the size of a grown man with wings. So yeah, I you know, that's kind of scary.
Oh yeah.
So there are some theories here, right, about this, and it says the most commonly accepted theory suggests that the Blackbird of Chernobyl that may have been the same creature dubbed as the Mothman that terrorized the population of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, leading up to the collapse of the Silver Bridge on December the 15th, 1968. So what do you think there with the theory that maybe this is the same phenomenon, the same phantom, the same thing? And if it is, would it be more paranormal than as a real flesh and blood thing?
Well, I mean, if they just seen the bird, I'd say maybe there's just some sort of weird creature that we don't know about out there, like a large bird that they've seen. But it's the fact that there's things around it that sort of, I don't know what I'm trying to say. There's things around it, like the fact that it's seen before a terrible disaster, as if it knows the future, and the things with the weird phone calls and the nightmares. That it's almost like it's affecting people's minds or getting into staying in contact with them after they've had a sighting of it. I mean, that's got to be something paranormal, hasn't it? It can't be like some weird mutant bird that they've seen. If those weird events afterwards are happening as well.
Well, the interesting thing is, it says here, both the Blackbird of Chernobyl and the Mothman have not been sighted since their retrospective disasters, leaving many unanswered questions. Now, also, Pripyat, the nearby abandoned city, okay, so Chernobyl workers, that was the city for the Chernobyl workers of the town, is believed to be haunted. People have had the feelings of being watched, then walking past the city hospital. Apparitions and shadows are often seen. Some have been even reported being touched. So, I try, when I hear stories like this, I always try to put myself in the position of the person it possibly happened to, and I'll quite freely admit it to everyone that if I'm in a situation like that and I'm having an experience that I can't explain, I can't sort of go, well, I know what that is. I can see it, or I can feel it, or I can smell it, or whatever it is. I'm wondering if, your senses take over and that kind of fright thing in your head starts to build up and you experience something internally, but you project it externally.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Especially in a place like that, like we said, it must be so eerie walking around there, and you're going to be, your senses are going to be so heightened, and you're going to start to think, oh my God, what was that? Like a shadow or something goes past you. You'll think, what was that? You'll turn, you'll see a shape in the window.
Well, yeah, it's like taking for example, when I was a young lad, I used to have a friend who lived in a village, and the way to get from the village to my home, because I lived on like a new build estate, so I had to walk a particular way, and if I didn't want to walk, which took me 40 minutes to get home, my option was to walk the road. Okay, that was like a 40-minute walk, or if I wanted to be home in like just over 20 minutes, I would cut through the graveyard. And on many occasions, I would leave him at about 11 o'clock at night, and I would walk down the road, right, and the road came to like a fork, and the road went straight, and that would be the road that you walked, which would take like nearly 40 minutes to get home. And some nights I wouldn't, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to do the long way home. And some nights, if I was slightly later and I had to be home by about 11:30, and I would do the graveyard. I would think I'm going to go up through the graveyard, and the graveyard was you would walk into it, and then it was on a hill, so you'd go up through these wooded area. There was like steps, and you'd have graves either side of you. And many a time when I went through that graveyard, I always felt either like I was being watched, or I was being, that horrible feeling of being followed. Someone behind you, and you think any minute they're going to run up behind you. And it's completely dark. It's a village. There's not many people around. It's not a very big village. And one night in particular, I was halfway through the graveyard, and I thought I saw someone over in the corner, like there was like some trees, and I thought I saw someone in the shadows. Firstly, I thought it was some kids, and I thought, here we go. I'm a mod, obviously skinheads. It's going to be a fight. Someone's going to get chased.
Yeah.
And I stopped, and it was completely silent. And I stopped, and I didn't know what to do. I thought, it's just as far for me to walk back out of this graveyard, and it's just as far for me to walk forward to that gate that I can see right at the end of that lane. That's my way out. But to get out of that gate, I have to walk over this walkway where I think I saw whatever it was, that I don't know what it was. It might have, more than likely, it was a trick of the light, or it might have been a bird, or I don't know. But I just slowly walked towards, and all I did was keep my eyes on the gate at the end. And I thought, whatever happens, happens. And I walked. But it was that, as I got near the gate, I had this immense rush that someone was coming up behind me. And as soon as I walked through that gate, I was like, I'm safe because I'm on the main road. But that put me off walking through that graveyard for quite a few months. I always I left my mates early, and I'd walk the long way home. So whether that something was in the graveyard and whatever, or I picked up on something, I don't know. Or it was just me, my adolescent hormones in overdrive. I mean, have you ever had that experience?
I've had a strange experience in a graveyard when I was a teenager. It didn't happen to me; it happened to someone else. But I know that feeling you mean when you feel that something's coming up behind you. And you've got to rush. I used to feel that in my house when I was a kid. That there was I think I've spoken to you about it before. There was a certain room that was really spooky, and every time I was walking away from that room, I just had this urge to like run, because it felt like something was just behind me, like surging me onwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a strange experience when I was a teenager. When me and a group of friends were out drinking, and we were in like a little village up in the mountains in Wales where we lived, and I think there was four of us there, and there was me and somebody else sat on. We went into the graveyard and we were drunk. We were just messing around, being noisy, and me and my friend sat in the doorway of the church. Like the door was closed, but there was like a bit of a step as you go in. So we were sat in there, and there were two friends in front of us, and we were just talking away. And the two friends who were stood up in front of us suddenly stopped, looked at each other. Their faces went white, and we were all half cut. So it wouldn't be most things you wouldn't even notice because you were drunk. Like, you wouldn't be scared of most things, but their faces went white, and they were like, "What the hell was that?" And they'd heard from behind the door, which was right behind where we were sitting, this like unearthly growling noise, like a really angry, like they said it sounded like a massive dog or something, but not like an earthly dog, like a demonic sort of sound. But me and my friend who was sat in the doorway didn't hear a thing. We were like, what are you going on about? But they'd heard it like from right behind us, this noise, and they were sort of stood up in front of us, and they weren't just messing around trying to spook us. They both stopped at the exact same second, went white, and looked at each other, and were like, "Did you hear that?" So
that's wow. That's if I'd have heard something like that, I thought, nah, we're leaving now, boys. We're off.
Yeah, but the fact I didn't hear it, and my friend didn't hear it, and we were closer to the door than them, and we were just like, oh, what we didn't, what are you going on about? So yeah, I'm quite open to strange experiences in graveyards. I've got a lot of time for those sort of stories. I don't know if it's all imagination just because of the spooky location.
Yeah,
I think there's something eerie about those places, and I definitely think something strange goes on in some of them.
Well, yeah, I think that like anywhere, if you think about not the fact that it's full of deceased people, but the fact that I think it's the living that are the people that imprint on those places. And if you think about how many people go, when people, if people go to a funeral, they're very upset, very emotional. It's a very emotional time in their life. I mean, I've been to enough funerals. I've done both my parents' funerals, and you go to a funeral, and it's where at this solemn place, and you think all that energy that it's going somewhere. It's being and not the person that maybe had the life and is being buried, is being put to rest, but the people that are there who are still alive, and they're doing the imprinting, and it's that energy. Not necessarily the energy is has an individual personality, but it's able to manifest in a way where if other people like you or I go into the place, and we don't know these people, we don't know who they are, anything like that, but we pick up on that energy, and we are able to. It manifests through us, our consciousness, our psyche, whatever you want to call it. I don't like using all these kind of catchphrases, but it manifests through us in a way that brings out maybe if it's from a trauma event, and obviously a funeral is, it brings out that sadness through us, or that fear, or that that whatever it might be, and that's what we might be experiencing. I know it's a bit of a long-winded way of me saying it. Maybe it's just making us scared, but I don't know. I mean, I speculate.
Well, yeah, but I mean, personally, I don't know if there's much difference between when people say like, oh, it's just all in your head because you're in a spooky place, and you're picking up on these sort of emotions and things. I don't know if there's much difference between like I think maybe when we actually see a spirit, it might just be something that we see in our head, but it might be something that's there and we pick up on, but our brain sort of project. Your vision, it goes up into your brain and gets processed there, doesn't it? How do you know like your brain isn't doing some sort of post-processing and inserting these images?
Well, yeah.
That's why maybe if you took a picture and you didn't see something there, but you saw it there in front of you.
Well, yeah.
It could be that like you're picking up on these energies, and you sort of, you might see an apparition, but it might just be the emotion of the place sort of interacting with your brain, and you're sort of turning it into an image that seems to appear in front of you.
And I know we've gone off on a little tangent. That's what I love about talking to you, because we always go off on these little these little kind of topics. And you raise an interesting point there, that we perceive the world. The way that we perceive the world is through our senses, and our senses, build a picture for us. So everything that we're experiencing right now is we are sensing, we are seeing, we are hearing. We're smelling, whatever. And if something is able to change that perception, then we perceive our reality in a completely different way. If I was to be able to change the way that you maybe saw stuff or you heard stuff, then you are going to perceive your world, the way that you perceive your surroundings, completely differently. And this is possibly something that goes on when we go into a inverted commas, a haunted location, or a place that's got paranormal phenomenon, where we're going into a place where something environmental is more stronger than it is in our everyday to-day life, and that it's infecting us, or some people, not everyone, because some people can go to places and have nothing happen to them, and some people go there and they have these wild, crazy experiences. So maybe some people are more sensitive than others, but once again, I'm simply just speculating.
It's something I've been trying to think of how to word properly, because I wanted to get this down and maybe talk about it in a video or something. And I haven't really worked out how to word it properly, but just because I read a lot of like skeptical stuff as well, and a lot of that talks about how the environment can play tricks on your mind, and you'll probably just hallucinate things, or you just imagine you're seeing things, and like my thoughts is just like, I don't know, like it's almost like I don't really know what the difference between the skeptical answer and the paranormal answer is, because it might well be that you're hallucinating something, but it's more about what the input is. Like what's causing these hallucinations, if they are hallucinations, like what's causing these things to happen, and could it be that there's some sort of paranormal input, there's some sort of energy that you're picking up on. I think that's where the difference is between what the skeptic says and what the believer says. The skeptic will say it's just like your mind playing tricks, whereas it could be your mind playing tricks, but it could be that the input is something paranormal and something that's actually there.
Well, there was let's take, for example, London Underground and the stuff that's been seen there. People have witnessed stuff. They've seen figures. They've heard people. Even one tunnel walker had an experience where they have a job. What their job is, they walk the tunnels. After the tube closes, they get a flashlight and they walk the tunnels and they make sure that the tracks are safe. There's no damage or anything. This one walker, he had a feeling that he was being followed, and he started to panic and he ran. He dropped his flashlight and he became so disorientated and scared that he basically curled up in the side, like the side of the track, the side of the tunnel. And he said he clearly heard a pair of footsteps walk up to him and then walk past him on the stones, the chippings that they have where the tracks are. And he couldn't see anything. And his flashlight was illuminating the area of the tunnel where he was, but he couldn't see anything. Now, there has been some research done in places like there, and there is a possibility where we have low frequency sound, infrasound, which is possibly affecting the way that we perceive our reality, the way that we are seeing things and processing the data that we're experiencing. Because with infrasound, I don't want to get too technical, but it in a way it's such a low frequency that it can even distort the eyeball, and it can make us see things. We can make us hallucinate things that might not be there, objects or we can, and we interpret those as what we're seeing because that's what our brain is doing. It's processing that information. Yeah. So there's a possibility. So I understand it from a skeptical point of view, but I think that when it comes to this, with the paranormal, it is good and it is healthy to have a little dose of skepticism with everything. You should. But
it's in something like that, another way to look at it possibly is things can cause hallucinations, but it's what you see. It's and
why do you
for
see
example, it? I've read quite a few stories of people who have taken like hallucinogens and they've done them with other people, and at some point, like 2 or 3 people have all seen the exact same thing without any input.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, they're taking a drug that's causing them to hallucinate and have an altered perception, but it's almost like they must have picked up on something it's there, maybe an energy or something, or
they're opening a door.
They're opening themselves up.
Yeah.
So things can cause hallucinations, perhaps. But that doesn't mean, it could be it's just opening you up to some other experience. So,
I think one of the most well-known cases for that kind of theory is people that do the ayahuasca, and they'll take their ayahuasca, then ingest it, and then it will have its effects on them, and they'll have their experience. And they have experiences with what they call these large insectoid creatures. And this isn't just one person that's had this experience. Multiple people that don't know each other, that have a completely different lifestyle, they've got different belief structure, they're from different walks of life, and they'll ingest the ayahuasca, and they'll have this experience with these insectoid creatures. And you think to yourself, is there something in our mind that it gives us the ability to open a door and have an experience with something that's maybe on a different level to us, maybe a different dimension, and that we can tap into that?
There's the DMT elves,
DMTs,
the machine elves. I've heard of those. I mean, it's not something I've tried myself, but I've heard of different drugs can make people see different things, but it's like it's consistent among people who have had no contact with each other. It's very interesting. I'll tell you something that happened to me once when I was at uni. Me and my friend, and this was a time where you could buy mushrooms legally in the shops, because there was something about if they weren't dried, if they were fresh, you could just buy them. It was like I don't know, there was like some loophole in the law. So me and my friend tried them.
I've never done mushrooms.
I'm not a big, I'm not a big drug guy or anything, but it was uni and we were just sort of experimenting, I suppose. And so we took these mushrooms and we were walking around the streets, just me and my friends, and we were just laughing and talking about things. And we both stopped and looked at this giant boulder, which was outside one of the university buildings.
Right.
And I was looking at it and I thought to myself, that looks like a baby sleeping, like a baby sleeping on its side. And my friend turned to me and goes, does that rock looks like a baby? And it was like I'd thought it in my head, and he was seeing the exact same thing as me.
That's weird.
We went, it was, and it felt like we were sort of seeing almost like the spirit of this boulder. It was really odd. And we went back there late, the next day when we were sober, and we looked at this rock, and it didn't look anything like a baby. It was so odd that we'd both seen this thing at exactly the same time. It was very odd experience.
So you didn't tell him, hey, that looks like a baby. He just...
No, I was just thinking it in my head, and he turned to me and said the exact same thing that I was seeing. It was so odd.
That's weird. I mean, I had this is years ago, I had a friend who was proper into doing like tripping. Like he was into tripping, and he took back in those days, it was they had like little acid tabs and stuff like that, and he was into all that stuff. And I remember him telling me of an experience he had where he went to it was a party or something, and somebody gave him something. It was like a concoction of hallucinogens, and he took it, and he wanted, and he was totally into just experiencing different things. Yeah. And he told me a story that he was walking home, and all the trees that were planted at the side of the road via the pavement, or the sidewalk for those that call it different, but the pavement, the sidewalk, you want to call it, they had trees, and as he walked by the trees uprooted, and their roots became legs, and they walked with him. And as he was walking home, he had this huge gaggle of trees following him, and he said he wasn't scared, because he just thought, well, they're just trees, man. They're just coming for a walk. But at the time, he said it was as real as you're stood in front of me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's one of the weirdest stories I've ever had somebody tell me, that he walked home with a bunch of trees. So,
that would terrify me.
Yeah. And they didn't say anything to him. They just walked with him. They just followed him. Yeah, like he was the Pied Piper. They're all on like the pavement, the sidewalk. Crazy. Anyway, I want to get back to this. That we've got an account to read from this Chernobyl. So we're talking about people that have had experiences, and we went off a little bit of tangent there, but that's the way we're going to rock. So it's a harrowing account of Chernobyl was given by Andriy, and I'm going to murder this name, but I'm going to do my best. It's Andriy Karsukov. That's as best I can do. I'm sorry, but that's the best I can do. A nuclear physicist from the University of Buffalo, after visiting the site during 1979. So that's what you got to remember. 1997. Sorry. This is what he's written. This is his account. I arrived at the abandoned by this time. Remember that this is later on. This is 97. So the city is now completely. There's no one in it. It's a massive city it's derelict. It's abandoned. So I arrived in the abandoned power station at about 7:30 a.m. I proceeded directly to the reactor 4 sarcophagus where the explosion took place. I could not enter due to radiation, because back then the radiation levels were really, really high. I stood at the entrance taking radiation and rotogen readings. Rotogen readings. Maybe I've got that wrong, but that's the best I can do. I know no one could have been inside the old reactor core, but I could very distinctly hear the sound of someone screaming for help, shouting that there was a fire inside. I ran upstairs to tell someone, but they said that when I entered the reactor control room, I was the first person to open the door in 3 years. That's scary in itself. And the only way that I could get inside the old reactor is through the doors I came through. If someone had gone inside the reactor when I was not looking, they would have tripped an alarm that goes off when the reactor door is opened mechanically. The reactor doors require a password and a handprint, yet someone or something was inside. Later that evening, as we were eating our dinner outside the building, by the river next to the plant, a floodlight turned on in the room of the installation. There was no way anyone could have been inside. As we ate, we figured there was a power surge or something. Then he goes on to say, then just as my colleague said, that light turned off. So basically, yeah, that's imagine that.
That's terrifying.
You go to a building that's been abandoned for many years and you can hear someone inside screaming for help that there's a fire, and you know that no one's. You're the first person to have been in there for a number of years.
I mean, did he speak?
No,
like it was what he was from America. So what did he hear the voice screaming in English?
He doesn't say. He said all he said is, "I stood at the entrance." So he said, I know no one could have been inside the reactor, but I could hear clearly hear the sound of someone screaming for help, shouting that there was a fire. So he doesn't state whether they were shouting in Russian
Maybe he
or
speaks language,
English,
or
but
maybe, yeah.
if he's over there, and he's most probably knows the lingo anyway, you know.
Yeah, or it's like I say, if these sort of things are a sort of hallucination that you're picking up on, you might hear something like that in your own language, and you could be picking up on like somebody screaming in Russian or Ukrainian or whatever language they were speaking.
Well,
And,
yeah, I mean,
you'd hear it, you'd pick up on the energy of it rather than the actual words, and you'd hear something in your own voice.
Do you remember a TV show called Destination Truth?
No.
Okay, so I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there who go, yeah, I remember that program. It was about a paranormal team that they were like a bunch of investigators, and they would go to different places around the world, and they would sort of, this mine is haunted. We're going to spend the night in the mine, and they did a thing on Chernobyl. It says, when the Sci-Fi Channel's Destination Truth team conducted a paranormal investigation at Chernobyl, numerous incidents were recorded. After donning radioactive protection suits, the team investigated the remains of Reactor 4. They were shocked to see a human figure appear on a thermal imaging camera inside the reactor. Throughout their analysis of the abandoned hospital, the team continued to spot multiple figures moving in a seemingly abandoned building. Now, I saw this episode, and I must say, if you get the chance, or if you can find it, look it up and watch it. That's to you, John, but that's to other people. It really is interesting because they do. If it's the episode, I'm pretty sure it's the episode I'm thinking of. They go to the one, it's in an abandoned hospital. There's no one in there, but they're shining their night vision unit onto the hospital, looking at the windows, because it's like a long walkway, and it's got windows going all the way down, and you can clearly see heat signatures passing in front of the windows, as if it were a human figure from the torso up, because he couldn't see the legs, but as if it were a person walking past the window. Now, yeah, okay, it could have been something else, it could have been, but it happened more than once. They were getting these, should we say, humanoid-like heat signatures. So yeah, I mean, if you're in a place where there's not meant to be anyone, but it is a city, and I would say that even if a city's been evacuated and it's there for years afterwards, I would say that there more than likely is people that have moved back there and that are living, in there.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard stories of there was just people in there that people who just didn't leave, and they just stayed there, and they got irradiated, but they just survived somehow. And yeah, I have heard that there's always been people living there, but it's just very few, just a few crazy people. Yeah, so there must be some dotted about.
So that was, I think we should move on. This is going to be here for hours and hours and hours. This is going to be like I'm certainly making up for my shorter episodes. One of the things is,
actually, I wanted to add something about the because what we're talking about, we went off on a ramble about hallucinations and things, just about the sort of Mothman or the Blackbird.
Yeah.
And I said, like, the trauma of a place sort of imprints itself. But you don't know whether you could maybe perceive a trauma that's coming rather than something that's already happened. Like the people that were there in the run up to this terrible event, they might have somehow subconsciously picked up on this terrible thing that was about to happen, and maybe that's how maybe in our heads, that's how these premonitions appear, as some sort of big ominous black bird, and that's why. But before these events, a lot of these creatures are seen. I don't know.
No, you picked up on something there. We're going to go off on another tangent now. The Owlman of Mawnan will have to wait, because I wanted to just pick up on what you were saying. Okay, so you said something there, and I thought, yeah, there's a possibility. Here's a theory for you. Maybe if the Phantom, the Mothman, the large bird thing of Chernobyl. Maybe it was like an omen, okay, and maybe it has the ability, if it is sentient, intelligent, and it is trying to relay a message. Maybe it has the ability to. It is omnipresent. It's able to see the past and the future at the same time. Therefore, it's able to see what's coming, but it has to communicate it in a way where it can't just go, all right then, this is going to happen, just letting you know, all right, I'm going to fly off now. It's not doing that. It can't do it that way because it's not able to communicate in that kind of way. It can only communicate through, should we say, some sort of symbology, where it's able to try to give a fear, make you scared, and in that way it's able to makes you scared. You think, oh, something's going to happen, or I'm very anxious about whatever. But unfortunately, we are very when we have a feeling like that, we're very sort of inward looking. We think, oh, it's about me. It's about me. We're not seeing the bigger picture. So maybe these things are able to. They exist out of our realm of perception. If they come in to communicate with us, we're not perceiving anything more than what we perceive in our little sort of bubble of experience. They are coming into that to relay a message. But here's another thing. There's been, if you think of the world, right, and all of the disasters that have happened, right, around the world, and there's been some horrible ones. Why Point Pleasant? Why Chernobyl? What are those two events? What makes them? And I don't want us to be horrible, I don't want people to think I'm being disrespectful. But what makes them special? Why are those things happening there and not? And I'm okay. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure, and there's people disagreeing, but there are most probably these events happening all over the place, and people are seeing things and not understanding what they are, and then there's a tragedy. But why these things? Why are these things more? Why do they stand out more? Yeah,
I don't know. It could be that It could be that there is other events where such things have been seen, or similar things have been seen. There was something in the 20s. Hold on, I think I've got it saved here. So I've got a few tabs open. There was what, like, maybe these sort of creatures are seen before a lot more disasters, and people just don't report them, or they don't make enough of a impression that people just sort of don't think too much of it. They might just see a bird and just think, oh, that's a big bird.
But why a bird? Why a winged creature? It's not really. We say a bird. I don't know.
An angel or a demon, or it could be anything, couldn't it? It's just an ominous sort of, literally an omen of some sort, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know why
we would have like the phenomenon of black dogs. I mean, you were gonna. I cut you off there, but you continue your thought.
No, I was just going to say there was another one. 1926. There was a winged humanoid in China.
Okay.
Just before. Hold on, I'm just reading. Yeah, there was just before there was a massive structural failure and collapsed, sending over 40 billion gallons of water crashing onto the farming villages below. So just before that happened in 1926, apparently they saw this winged creature that looked like a human, and they named him the Mandragon. So, 1926. Who knows how many other events have happened where something strange has been seen and maybe just hasn't been reported, or person saw one person saw it and they just thought, no one's ever going to believe me. They just didn't say anything, or I don't know.
Well, it's definitely a bit weird, and it's going to get weirder. So moving on, we've got another story here, and it's one that's in Cornwall, England. and it starts off. It goes back to like the 1920s. It's known as the Owlman of Mawnan. And to give you a little bit of a background, it says a remote church in Cornwall is said to be the home of a half-man, half-owl creature, which has terrified locals and holidaymakers since the 1920s. St Mawnan and St Stephen's Church, located about a mile from the village centre of Mawnan Smith, is a peaceful building surrounded by woods and boasting breathtaking sea views. But according to Cornish folklore, it has been haunted by a human-sized owl with large wings, large claws and glowing eyes. The Owlman of Mawnan Smith was first sighted in April 1976. On that day, two teenage girls were on holiday with their parents in the village, and they are said to have walked down to the old remote church. On the top of the tower, they saw what they described as a terrifying birdman with wings and feathers. It says the story says that they were so scared by the sighting that their father decided to put an end to their holiday and leave Cornwall immediately. In the July of the same year, two 14-year-old girls decided to go camping in the area, but spotted a giant owl, human owl-sized creature with glowing eyes. All eyes turned to the village, and the discovery made the national headlines. However, the Owlman was quickly branded a hoax when people realised that all the reports led back to one man, magician and paranormal researcher Tony Doc Shields. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you've read a little bit about this, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I don't know. The whole Doc Shields thing is kind of a bit suspicious, really, just because he's a bit of a dodgy character, and he was known for sort of hoaxing things, and he wrote books on how to hoax stuff. He did like magic shows, so he wrote a lot of books on like hoaxing things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he was hoaxing everything he was involved with. And he was quite a well-known character in the area, wasn't he? So, and he was known for being into all kind of weird stuff. So the thing is, if something strange did happen, then he's the kind of character you would go and look up to try and, tell your story to. So, yeah, I don't know. I researched it quite a lot, and I came away still not really knowing what to make of the whole story, because he's such an interesting character, and the fact that most of the stories were related to him, it's just a weird one, and I still don't know what to make of the whole thing, really.
I remember that story, the Owlman of Mawnan. That goes back for me. I remember seeing it in a book when I was quite young, and back then it was what I would call a reasonably recent story, only happening a few years previous, and it was in like I think it was a paperback or a storybook, but it was a story of mysteries and that sort of thing you would get at a library. And I remember reading it and completely it kind of scared me a little bit, because I was only a little kid, and but it really kind of stayed with me. And as the years went by, as you say, there isn't a lot of information, and the kind of whenever you sort of do a bit of research, it always kind of leads back to the same person or the same sort of, you get to the same place, And
it's
I don't know.
It's one of them ones where it all sort of circles around the same sort of person, but it's got so many threads to it, this story as well. I found every time I looked into it, I found something else to go down. And
we're going to skip over the Owlman of Mawnan, because although it's it's a classic, as you say, it is quite limited in how far you can go with it. But
there is sightings still going up till today, and there's someone who's claimed to have got a video of the Owlman. There's like a video where someone's panning across the graveyard at night. Yeah, I'll send you a link to it after this. There's a bit where he's it's like a 2-hour video. They're doing like a proper ghost investigation, and the camera pans over in the graveyard of Mawnan Church, and just in the background you see very briefly like a figure standing there. It just looks like a man, but when you zoom in, you can see that he's got it. It almost looks like when you see these pictures of the owls with this sort of it almost looks like they've got two horns, but it's
Yeah.
like the tufts on top of their ears.
Yeah,
It looks like that from the top of his head, and it's such a weird little image. But you only see it for like a split second in this video. But people are claiming that that's the Owlman still haunting the graveyard.
Wow.
So and I don't think that's in any way linked to Doc Shields. So
yeah,
I
always look at these things from kind of both sides of the fence, and as we spoke earlier in this episode, if I tell you a certain place, a certain legend of a certain place, or if I tell you something happened at a certain place, or if I tell you a building has got something going on in it, and I tell you that enough, there'll be a point where your subconscious will take note of it. You'll stop listening.
Yeah.
You'll stop listening long ago and think you shut up. But your subconscious will have made a mental note of it, and then when you go to that place under the right conditions, you might actually experience what I've been telling you, which might be a load of old cobblers.
Yeah, and and the fact that this story, it might have started out as a hoax. I don't know. But it made the headlines. It was on TV. It was all over the place. Loads of people heard of this story, and loads of people believed it. So you've got all these people going to this place and looking for the Owlman, and it might manifest something just from the it might be some sort of like thought form that's created by all these people. All these people's subconscious combined might have like created something more solid.
Well, staying around this this kind of era, that was like the late 70s. But you sent me a story that I must admit I've until you sent it to me, I'm completely unaware. When you sent it to me, I thought I've never heard of this before. And this happened in like 1963, didn't it? To 4 British teenagers. Well, they experienced, they witnessed what was it? The Bat Beast of Kent, which is very similar to like these owl kind of Mothman kind of crypto thing. What's this one about?
Yeah, as you say, 1963. It was 4 teenagers, and I think they'd been to a house party. So I don't know whether they were drunk or not, but they were heading back from a house party, and the first strange thing that happened to them was that they like a glowing light sort of went over the top of them, and headed into headed into some like woodlands or some brush that was nearby.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't. I don't think they saw it land, or they didn't see where it went, but they watched it go over and dip down into these trees, and then out of some nearby bushes, this the Bat Beast of Kent emerged, and it was described as being sort of like, I think it was like the size of a man, but it's almost like a headless bat. It's like a sort of, if you imagine just like a bat's body with the wings, and then like 2 little like waddling legs,
like duck feet. Yeah, like webbed duck feet. Bizarre.
Just sort of waddled out of the trees.
So it says, while the teenagers were still reeling from the astonishing sighting, something even more inconceivable would soon grab their attention. Moments after the extraordinary craft apparently landed behind the trees, the teens noticed a shaking in the brush, and what emerged was one of the most unique varmints ever to be chronicled in ufology. So they did notice as you say, a light out.
They didn't see the craft, this light sort of land and it come out of it. Yeah. It was just it was almost like a coincidence. They just think the two are related because they happen like so close to one another. But
later, the 4 horrified eyewitnesses would explain that an erratic, shambling, quasi-humanoid figure emerged from the woods and waddled towards them. The beast apparently looked like a headless bat that was approximately 5 feet tall, with large webbed feet and wings protruding from its back. In Hutchison's own words, it didn't seem to have any head. There was huge wings on its back, like bat wings. Wow. I mean, come on, be honest, you'd have run away because I would have.
Yeah. And that's a lot of and that's really similar to a lot of the Mothman sightings. A lot of them are described as looking like a creature with no head, or almost like its face was in its chest.
Yeah, But
Yeah,
yeah,
so
very similar. Very
it's
similar.
so it's like eerily similar to a lot of sightings of
Yeah.
these sort of Mothman things. Yeah.
But later, it says less than a week later, on the 21st of November, a young man named Keith Croucher seemed to confirm the team's claim of an unusual object soaring over Kent when he announced that he too had seen the oddly shaped craft hovering over the local soccer field, not far from where Flaxton and his crew had claimed to have their curious encounter with a UFO and its bizarre occupant. On the 23rd of November, John McGoldrick decided that the reports coming from the Sandling Park were simply too outrageous to be ignored. So, after soliciting the help of an unnamed yet clearly intrepid friend, McGoldrick and his cohort made their way to the site of the unusual goings-on, hoping to perchance the face-to-face encounter with the strange alien creature. Once inside the woodland, McGoldrick claimed that he and his companion discovered no less than 3 footprints, each 24 inches long and 9 inches across. That's pretty big. He also stated that he had stumbled across an area where the foliage, bracken, had been flattened, as if something of tremendous weight had landed. McGoldrick claims to caught the ear of the local press, where it's going to just go on about him talking to these, the newspapers and stuff. It says, while reports did not manage to turn up any evidence, it was stated that the thickets were still bathed in an eerie glow, which continued for some days before subsiding. Glowing stuff. I've heard that before. When there's been alleged UFO landings and sightings, that sometimes that there's a glowing substance that's left behind, a residue, and it would glow under ultraviolet light or certain lighting conditions where like a watch, it'd be luminous, and it would last for a few days and then it would subside and disappear. It says in the 1970s, ufologist Chris Wolf also reopened the case. According to his records, he interviewed Flaxton and also inspected the scene of the unearthly encounter. Following his investigation, Wolf came to the dubious conclusion that what Flaxton and Hutchins and their chums actually saw was an ordinary crow, oddly illuminated with the flashing of the electric train passing far away. Well, okay, so
that doesn't make sense to me.
So he says it was a crow and there was a train that was going along far away, and the light from the train made the
hit the crow.
No. I find
sometimes the sort of skeptical explanations are so far fetched. It's almost as if the more paranormal explanation is the more reasonable one.
Whenever you read something like that, okay, it is bizarre. Okay, anything that we've talked about on this. I mean, that was the last story that we had, but all those stories in themselves are very unique, and they all warrant an investigation, of course, because it's something out of the norm. But when you have a case like this, you always have to be a little bit skeptical, because you have to say, well, we need you need the one side and the other. You just can't say what it was. But sometimes, as you've just said, when you have to find a logical or rational explanation to something, sometimes it can't be done, because what you come up with is more bizarre than the actual bizarre that's happened.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard, and the only explanation that sounds sort of plausible in a lot of these cases is that they might have seen an owl. There's certain species of owls, I think an eagle owl, which is so big, it can look like a person. If you saw one like waddling along the ground for some reason, it would almost look like a person walking. Or if you saw one up in the air, you might think it was like some giant creature. But it's all the weird stuff around it. You see a glowing light flying into the woods, and then this thing comes out, or you see this creature, and then you start getting strange phone calls and having weird nightmares.
Well, here,
it's all the weird stuff linked to it. That
yes, I mean, as we are approaching the end of this podcast, I just wanted to interject another avenue of thought, and that is that when we talk about owls and when we talk about these kind of creatures, there is a connection with the abduction phenomenon and people that see owls on their before they have their experience, or after they've had their experience, or as their experience is ongoing and they are having these abduction, whatever they are, that they encounter owls, and and these owls are in a way either watching them, overlooking them, or they're trying to give a message or something. It's a very strange, just very strange, and a little bit unsettling as well, don't you say?
Yeah. I've heard a lot of stories of people who their only memory of a sort of abduction scenario is waking up and seeing an owl watching them through the window. And there's a theory that it could be a sort of a screen memory that's sort of implanted. So instead of seeing an alien, they see an owl, and then when they tell their parents, "Oh, there was an owl looking at me," they wouldn't really be. It wouldn't seem to be that out of the ordinary. It'd be something along those lines.
Perfectly plausible, because we talk about. I know we're going into the realms of UFOs and stuff, but it's all kind of in the same basket. But when we think of that, I recently did a short episode on the Gateshead Grey, and one of the things that fascinated me with that is allegedly the young boy that had the experience. He saw these motley crew of aliens that were all different. You had your little greys, you had your big Sasquatch looking one, and you had your another one with this kind of diving helmet on, and then you had a normal looking bloke who was just nice blonde hair, looked very handsome. He had a big robe on, like he was some sort of lived in a castle, and he was the guy that that he felt most comfortable with, and he's the guy that came forward and talked to him and said, come on board the ship, I need to do something. And this isn't something that just happened to him. It's happened in many cases. If you go back to the Travis Walton case, where his abduction that he had when he woke up in the craft and he panicked and he got out, and there were these small horrific little creatures that were trying to subdue him, but they were very weedy and weak, and he sort of pushed them away and picked up what was like this kind of rod that he was going to use as a weapon, and then all of a sudden they left the room, and then these humanoid people came in, and they're like, calm down, everything's going to be fine. It's almost like they're taking on the form of a person to calm you. You're not going to be scared if you're going to see another person, even if they're dressed a bit weird. But if you're going to see these little grey things or whatever, and they're not even speaking to you, they're just trying to restrain you. But if a person comes in and says, look, let's have a chat, you're more likely going to go, oh, somebody like me, I'm safe.
Yeah.
Maybe what they are seeing is something that's being, as you picked up on earlier, that's being, in a way, mentally projected.
Yeah, that would raise the question as why it would appear as a giant headless black bat creature, or a red-eyed giant owl or something like that. Something so terrifying. Unless that's what it wanted to do. It wanted to scare them off, so it appeared as a something that would creep out a human being.
Unless it was, as you say, I mean, as we were talking about, unless it was a harbinger of an omen, and it's come from wherever, the netherworlds, to bring a message and try and convey a message, but it's all very cryptic, and you've got to kind of figure it out, unless you're on a time limit, before the whatever it might be happens, unless it's connected in some way. Maybe that event is connected to that, and without that can't happen. The mind boggles, doesn't it? Your final thoughts, Tom. What do you think's going on?
I can't really say what it is, because we've gone over so many different possibilities. Who knows? Is it a hallucination? Is it a UFO? Is it a demon? Is there any other paranormal phenomena that we didn't go across as a possibility? It could maybe it's a fairy creature of some sort. We haven't brought them up yet.
We haven't.
So,
But I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to
or a
save that.
ghost.
Or a ghost. It could be.
Yeah.
But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to save that for another episode, because I think we've reached the sort of end of this one. But that's not to say that we're not going to be continuing this conversation, because there's plenty more where that came from. So from my point of view, I'm kind of on the fence with you. I don't know what is going on here. These stories are a little bit unsettling, and they are a little bit strange. These people clearly saw something and they experienced something, but as to what it was, I don't think we're any closer to figuring that one out. That's a sort of story for another day, really. So anyway, Tom, so thanks very much for coming on another episode of Paratalk and joining me for this hour and a bit or whatever it was, and having a good old chat about all the things that are a bit weird. What's up with you? What have you got planned? What's happening with the Shrouded Hand?
Well, I've got a video I'm working on. I've put out so many depressing videos this month. Just really horrible, like true crime type cases, that I'm working on something a bit more lighthearted, and that's going okay. So hopefully that'll be out soon. But I need like a bit of a palate cleanser every now and then, because I cover so many horrible things that I need to do something about. Like, I don't know, I do a video about gnomes or something strange like that, just as a bit of a change of pace. So I'm working on a slightly more lighthearted thing. Hopefully that'll be out soon. Just usual thing with my channel. I don't really plan anything out, so I can't really tell you what's coming up in the future, because I'm just so disorganized. I just do everything on the fly, really. But
Well, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes you just think, I'll do this, and it works. And sometimes that's the kind of a healthy approach, because if you try too hard to do something, overachieve one thing, you'll get stuck in it and you get into that kind of hamster wheel. I've been there. So it's anyway, so there's me going on. This isn't sort of a teacher's corner, but it's me, I waffle. But anyway, so thanks for coming on, Tom, and thanks to everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, see you soon.